So I've been thinking for a while about how to do this video. I've known about Albert Camus and the Myth of Sisyphus for quite a while, and absurdism for quite a while, and I'm reading the Myth of Sisyphus. Kind of hard to say. Recently I've been reading it, last couple months. And so much of it sticks out to me, so much of it is relevant to my immediate experience and my immediate questions that I wanted to do the book justice, and so I've been avoiding doing this video, but I think I'm just gonna go ahead and dive in. And if I want to do an update video in the future, or if I want to explain it better in the future, I will. But I think that there's some real gold in here. First of all, Albert Camus, French philosopher around the time of the 1940s, before and after. He was the writer for the French Resistance newspaper in Nazi-occupied France. So he worked for the Resistance, the Maquis, I believe. And he was the main editor and director of writer, I believe, of the Resistance newspaper. So he does have some interesting moral credentials. If you don't know who he is, look up Albert Camus. He's got a lot of really interesting quotes. He's got a lot of one-liners that ironically contradict themselves compared to his other one-liners. Out of all the one-liners I've seen of any philosopher, he seems to have the most that just war with each other. I suppose being one of the founding fathers, or credited founding fathers of absurdism, that's appropriate. Absurdism is extremely hard to describe. It's going to sound like nihilism. It is not quite nihilism. If you look up absurdism, it says something along the lines of that you're going to see the term like nothing matters. And you'll also see that that everything is chaos, and that there is no ultimate or defining truth to the universe, anything. It's just all chaos bumping into each other. Don't let those throw you off. Those sound a lot like nihilism, and they might throw you off for the same reason that they throw people off about nihilism. So don't just think of that and then be like, oh, well, just saying nothing matters, and then okay, that's the whole philosophy. There's a lot of gold. And he was also credited with the line that I rather believe in God and be wrong when I die than not believe in God during life and then be wrong when I die, or something like that. And he also said, though, that I am not a theist, but I'm also not an atheist. Or he said, sorry, I messed that up. He said, I don't believe in God, but I'm not an atheist. So a lot of his quotes seem a lot like Crowley in the sense that they're supposed to be inflammatory, but he gets down to the heart of some things that make him quite interesting, and his work's worth reading. The Myth of Sisyphus and The Rebel, which I also have, are two of his most famous works. He has a lot of really good stuff, though. He is not without moral blemish, as he was still on the French's kind of side in Ethiopia and the colonization of that, though he felt morally obligated to backtrack, so he's not without moral flaw. However, I feel the man balances out, but that's up for you to decide. At any rate, I marked about 4 or 5 pages here. I'm going to be reading, and I kind of outlined some subsections that I think are interesting. I'm going to try to pose a coherent selection before you. I'm hoping that these things will lend themselves, what I'm about to read will lend themselves to each other, so that they help you understand absurdism a little bit more. I can't do it justice by just telling you what it is. And I don't want to just read definitions, because the definitions are very dry online, and but I want to give you the heart and soul of absurdism and kind of Albert Camus, so I've selected these sections. If you like this video at all, hit that thumbs up down there. It really helps out the channel. Feel free to leave a comment. Questions, comments, concerns, I try to answer and respond to any that are polite. At any rate, let's continue. So I am on page 50 of the Myth of Sisyphus. The danger, on the contrary, lies in the subtle instant that precedes the leap, being able to remain on the dizzying crest. That is integrity, and the rest is subterfuge. So he's talking about suicide, realizing that everything's hopeless, that we are so small and so obscure, and all the work that we will do during life will fade away in an instant, that we live in an instant. And we're so limited in our ability to perceive and understand that that's when the absurdist, somebody who follows absurdism, or that's the moment of realization when you realize there is no hope, and you're on the edge of, like, why not just die? Why not just end it? And he says that at being directly on that crest of just ending it all is integrity, and the rest is subterfuge. So let us continue forward. Gave you a little bit more there as far as like some summary than I meant to, but okay. The theme of permanent revolution is thus carried into individual experience. Living is keeping the absurd alive. Keeping it alive is, above all, contemplating it. Unlike Eurydice, the absurd dies only when we turn away from it. One of the only coherent philosophical positions is thus revolt. It is a constant confrontation between man and his own obscurity. It is an insistence upon an impossible transparency. It challenges the world anew every second, just as danger provided man the unique opportunity of seizing awareness. He's talking about the danger of realizing hopelessness and being on the edge of just jumping over the edge and just committing suicide. Just as danger provided the unique opportunity of seizing awareness, so metaphysical revolt extends awareness to the whole of experience. It is that constant presence of man in his own eyes. It is not aspiration, for it is devoid of hope. That revolt is the certainty of a crushing fate without the resignation that ought to accompany it. So accepting your own obscurity, accepting that nothing that we do really matters, but not having the resignation. I'll continue because obviously the resignation, like, oh, nothing matters, and like, why not just die? But let us continue. Okay, I'm jumping around here. So it may be thought that suicide follows revolt, but wrongly, for it does not represent the logical outcome of revolt. It is just the contrary by the consent it presupposes. Suicide, like the leap, is acceptance at its extreme. Everything is over and man returns to his essential history. Our essential history is that we didn't exist before, we're alive right now, every individual. So that's our essential history, is of non-existence. We exist right now, but before and after, Hunter does not exist. He's not talking about me, but jumping around. But I know that in order to keep alive, the absurd cannot be settled. That's a big point, and it's kind of bigger than it may seem. Let's put it that way. But the absurd and living and accepting the chaos of existence, that is what he's talking about. So let's go ahead and go to, see if I can jump around and not. So I'm going to jump back now, and I'm going to go to kind of when he for the first 50 pages, he's just putting to rest different philosophers addressing of suicide, God, things that surround suicide. And this whole book, it may not sound like it because you expect a book on suicide to be very like talking about killing yourself and stuff like that. But if you read it and you read it philosophically, suicide is something that all philosophies have had to address at one point or another, because all philosophers do. It's almost where philosophy starts in a way. Like, why not just die? You can disagree with me on that if you so desire. I might disagree with myself in the future. Okay, so how he starts all of this, when he's putting all of those ideas other philosophers have said to rest, and accepting some of the other ones. Absurd freedom. Now, the main thing is done. I hold certain facts from which I cannot separate. What I know, what is certain, what I cannot deny, what I cannot reject, this is what counts. I can negate everything of that part of me that lives on vague nostalgias, except this desire for unity, this longing to solve, this need for clarity and cohesion. I can refute everything in this world surrounding me that offends or enraptures me, except this chaos, this sovereign chance, and this divine equivalence which springs from anarchy. I don't know whether this world has a meaning that transcends it, but I know that I do not know that meaning, and that it is impossible for me just now to know it. What can a meaning outside my condition mean to me? I can understand only in human terms. What I can touch, what resists me, that is what I can understand. And these two certainties, my appetite for the absolute and for unity, and the impossibility of reducing this world to a rational and reasonable principle, I also know that I cannot reconcile them. What other truth can I admit without lying, without bringing in a hope I lack and which means nothing within the limits of my condition? So that kind of shows you where he started with this. I jumped back to it because it was relevant in the coherency of what I'm saying, not so much for what his argument. Well, I guess we're saying the same thing ultimately, but okay, we're gonna go to. I read that part, so we're gonna go to when he's addressing God and freedom. I thought this part was also interesting. I didn't highlight anything, so let me just jump to somewhere where I think will be helpful for everybody watching. Okay, I'll just read from the top of the page. I'm sure y'all don't mind if you're still listening. If I remain in that prearranged position, which consists in drawing all the conclusions and nothing else, involving a newly discovered notion, I am faced with a second paradox. In order to remain faithful to that method, I have nothing to do with the problem of metaphysical liberty. Knowing whether or not man is free doesn't interest me. I can experience only my own freedom. As to it, I can have no general notions, but merely a few clear insights. The problem of freedom as such has no meaning, for it is linked in quite a different way with the problem of God. Knowing whether or not man is free involves knowing whether he can have a master. The absurdity peculiar to this problem comes from the fact that the very notion that makes the problem of freedom possible also takes away all its meaning. For in presence of God, there is less a problem of freedom than a problem of evil. You know the alternative. Either we are not free and God, the all-powerful, is responsible for evil, or we are free and responsible, but God is not all-powerful. All the scholastic subtleties have neither added anything nor subtracted anything from the acuteness of this paradox. This is why I cannot get lost in the glorification or the mere definition of a notion which eludes me and loses its meaning as soon as it goes beyond the frame of reference of my individual experience. I cannot understand what kind of freedom would be given me by a higher being. I have lost the sense of hierarchy. The only conception of freedom I can have is that of the prisoner or the individual in the midst of the state. The only one I know is freedom of thought and action. Now, if the absurd cancels all my chances of eternal freedom, it restores and magnifies, on the other hand, my freedom of action. That privation of hope and future means an increase in man's availability. So that's another huge part of absurdism and what, his view of it is, and he's one of the founding fathers, is that, in absurdism, in philosophy, if you believe it as a philosophy, then we end when we die. There is a beginning and an end, and it is this life. So we are in a certain context in this individual experience, within certain confines, and we have limits on what we can know. So our action and experience actually become more relevant, not less relevant. Our obscurity and the meaninglessness of this universe actually make our experience more valuable because it only exists in a singular context. It does not exist in a grander context. It is not on a grander stage. It is on our own stage and our own experience for but a tiny moment in this universe. So it becomes extremely relevant. I think I've gone on long enough so far. If y'all like this, let me know. Let me see if I can. Sorry, I'm not very professional. I'm not a professional YouTuber apparently after 10 years. So yeah. But if you're still watching me, then you probably know that by now. At any rate, I think I'll pick up at a future date when I have more things marked, because there's more. There's more to talk about here, but I'm gonna leave it there for now. By the way, that's a whole lot of good content that's easily understood. Some philosophers write in a way that's very hard for people to understand, and you have to know, psychoanalysis, and you have to go into psychoanalysis and e priori or a priori, and like how, and like putting logic and mathematics and philosophy together, because it's a lot of philosophy. You have to understand how this mathematical structure of an argument, and it makes it harder to read. Here, it's much more laid out, much more easy to understand. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. Feel free to hit that like button down there. Feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, let me know how you like this. And I will talk to all of you in the future.